1, go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Words number 32. Dani is with me. We're going to get right to it because we don't have a tremendous amount of time today. How you doing, Dani?
I am well, Emily. How are you?
I'm doing great. And thank you to all the people for all the delightful and entertaining responses we've been getting to our shows lately. We don't get a big audience, but we certainly get an enthusiastic one. So I appreciate that.
We have a power audience. They're like
yes.
beloved supporters.
Yes. All right. So let's go through. You have kind of a list of things that we're going to kind of go through, and most of them sort of matched up to sort of areas that I was circling around as possible topics here. So we're going to go through it that way, and then if we have time, we might do a little afterwards segment again. So shoot.
Cool. Okay. So I had reached out, I don't remember what it was, but after the Joe Rogan, Edward Snowden show, because I know you have a lot of information on that. So I muscled through over a few days of watching that whole thing. And what I got from it was an extremely well-prepared, well-articulated, well-rehearsed, 2-something plus hour monologue from Edward Snowden, who I thought was like a surveillance guy, intelligence guy, whistleblower, but now he seems to be the moral authority for the entire country and the whole planet, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He kept saying, he was very measured. He would say something that kind of made Obama look bad, and then he would immediately jump in with, but this isn't to badmouth Obama. This isn't about Obama. So anytime he said something to indicate how many rights Obama had taken away or how far Obama had expanded the Patriot Act, he made a huge point of covering his tracks and saying that he wasn't saying anything bad about Obama. And then he made a point about not showing any sort of allegiance or respect for Trump. He told Joe that he would refuse a pardon from Trump, which I thought was really interesting. While Joe was lobbying for Trump to give him a pardon for political reasons. But the whole thing just felt like theater to me. And so my thought was, and the reason why I brought it up to you was what are they laying the groundwork for? Because at this point, Joe's not doing shows just to put out content. Like, it's all A leads to B leads to C leads to authoritarian, totalitarian slave world. So my questions for you are, what do you think that was leading to? And then the other piece is, I find it interesting that this whistleblower is so photogenic, so articulate, what are the odds that the intelligence geek who blows the lid does so well on camera, and now he has a book out, and it just feels a little bit artificial. And I know that you have more information, and you had talked about how Adam Curry had sort of given you a lot of information about how the Snowden thing was a sham, and I would love it if you could educate me a little bit on that, our audience a little bit on that. They probably know more than I do, and what you think this show was about. Okay,
first of all, before we get into that, can I see your shirt?
I was hoping you'd ask.
Okay. Oh, did you make this?
No, do you remember? So it's so funny. This was back in the MTV days when Madonna was doing those
right.
Get out the vote thing. And it's like a remake.
Okay.
I love it.
Because
I wear it every day.
The handwriting looks a little bit like the handwriting in your daily quote strip.
It does. It also looks like Basquiat. I don't know who the original artist was. This is not an original.
Okay, I just wasn't sure, because I was going to say, if those were your shirts, then they could be probably had for a small fee on your website. But because the handwriting looks a lot like your handwriting in the daily quote strip, which I was the star of the other day. So
thanks for having my back. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, so a lot of things. Okay, so
By the way, that was not the first time you were honored in print on my Instagram. I think I've quoted you before.
Yeah, I think there was one a while back too. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was a while ago. Yeah, but I wasn't on Instagram yet, and so I couldn't go like it over on Instagram.
I'm such a Matrix MASH nerd. I feel like I'm your guys' #1 fan. Like, I'm so excited every time you have a new show with Robert.
That's awesome. I like that. Okay, so here's there's a lot of stuff. First of all, I didn't suffer through that entire thing because I just couldn't stomach it. I listened to maybe the first 27 minutes of it or something. And all of it is like a bunch of niceties and stroking each other's backs about how wonderful each other are. It's fucking annoying. And the last one they did together was similar to that too. Okay, so a couple of things. Whenever you have somebody that always is speaking in monologue form like that isn't a poet or a spoken word artist, then generally they're running a script. And like there's, right, so like they're there to deliver a particular message and it needs to be delivered this way. So okay, trying to think about what the best place to start is here. So like, first of all, by the time Edward Snowden came along, because of the things that we had watched with Julian Assange, I was already very suspicious of any whistleblowers that got any attention. All of the real whistleblowers don't get any attention. Bill Binney, Thomas Drake, Russ Tice, like all of these people who like had their homes raided after they blew the whistle and, you know, spent time in jail and shit like that. Like they're only ever like, you know, interviewed on like RT and alternative media stuff, right? So whether the press is demonizing or glorifying said whistleblowers, glorifying would be Daniel Ellsberg, you know, demonizing would be Julian Assange, and Edward Snowden would be somewhere in between, right? Okay, that when they're getting this much attention and they're this famous for this long, our attention is being drawn to them for a reason that isn't kosher, right? Okay, so I was already suspicious because of, you know, like the thing with Julian Assange is very weird because there's things that obviously make him look like he is an asset working for intelligence agencies. And then there's things that make it look like, dude, maybe this is a guy who like thought he was in on it with them and then they turned on him. And so now it's like, it's impossible to tell. There's so much evidence of him being involved in like cults and programs and projects as a child, right? And there's so many, you know, things, there's so much weird stuff around him, but there's also the undeniable truth that he, in some way or another, is suffering right now, right? That he is suffering in some way or another, unless we live in a world that is faked even beyond your and my ability to comprehend at this point, which is possible. I leave that open. My hope for humanity doesn't want to accept that, and so I still only think about that occasionally. And there's the other thing that to the best of our ability to confirm, he's never published anything that's false, and that no one has ever said those aren't my documents. They've said that he should be arrested for publishing them, but no one's ever said that I didn't say that in those documents, right? So those are undeniable truths, is if the world is in any way anything we think it is, okay? So that's
really up for grabs right now, I just want to say.
Yeah. So Edward Snowden came along after that, and the operation is far more polished, right? So I was already suspicious by then. And, you know, it was just weird. It's like, you know, the people he chose to go to with his whistleblowing and stuff like that were people that I already knew to be, you know, propagandists of a certain level, right? They tell more truth than the mainstream propagandists, but they're still not telling the whole story, and they're controlling how the perception of the information is received and whatnot. So that, and then just the whole thing didn't really make a lot of sense to me. Right. So then the first person I really saw do a great breakdown of this was Adam Curry. Right. And he basically exposed, I don't remember all the details, and I did go back to look and see if I could find the episodes where he talked about it. And it's hard. There's not like an episode that's, no one seems to have clipped those parts, because I don't think most people know he really talked about this. So I would have to go through and listen to hours of episodes. If there's anyone out there
I've hunted for it. I haven't found it yet.
Okay, so if there's anyone, it's possible that it's been removed or edited by this point. But if anybody out there is a No Agenda fan, I know one or two people who did respond in the comments to our last video, maybe, or the one before, or something I've done with Robert, said they used to watch No Agenda anytime. If anybody has the time and patience to go through and find this segment from sometime, I believe in late 2013 or early 2014, of Adam Curry really breaking this down, we would repay you with our undying appreciation, and maybe even some swag from
I'll send you a book. I'll send you a copy of my book. We're done.
There we go. Okay, perfect. So, because it is important. But basically, it was, you know, this is a guy who's worked for both the CIA and the NSA. And so what he did was sort of putting the public on notice in a coded way that the CIA and the NSA were at war with each other. Mm-hmm. Okay, like they're always factionalized and whatever, but there really is a battle for control over data or surveillance, or I'm not sure what the parameter of the battle is. I'm not sure what the whole specter is, but that this is really what's going on, and that he, you know, he's the symbol, he is the sort of symbol of that he is a character with a background that doesn't make sense, right? And then all of the things that you're saying, this is a person who is doing what he was either programmed or trained or told to do and continues to do so. Yeah. Right? This is not like, you know, if he were really in exile, living a life, whatever, the aggression with which he would be pursuing the truth would be much stronger, and he'd be revealing things, controversial thing after thing after thing after thing after thing, right? Julian Assange, in his compromised position in terms of having no access to technology or whatever, continues to wage a bigger battle against the powers that shouldn't be, sort of, than Edward Snowden does, who has an internet connection.
Right. Powers that were, by the way. The
powers that were. Okay. So that. So then the other expose that I've seen of Edward Snowden that's interesting and hard to sort of accept, but the more I'm paying attention to this, and this is going to go into, I'm not going to give a lot of information on this because I'm hoping to do a three-way show with you and Robert about some of this at some point, is that I watched this show that was on Higher Side Chats. Maybe it was in 2014 or 2015. And I can't remember the guy's name or his website or anything like that. But he had a particular viewpoint on hoaxes and staged events. And he was of the opinion that Edward Snowden is CGI, that there is no real Edward Snowden, that everything that we look at is a computer-generated image that is just delivering this information, right? And some of the evidence that he used for it was that in some of the early videos of Snowden, there was like weird issues with like you could see through his glasses, like on one side, like they were like wood, what are they called? What it looks like wood or horn rim, whatever that material is. It's solid. You shouldn't be able to see through it, but it was like translucent and you could see his skin through it on one side. Like, not really translucent, like it looked like the glasses had been superimposed in a digital manner and they'd missed a spot.
It's interesting that you say that because in separate threads, there is a lot of controversy about his glasses and like, why has he had the same glasses for so many years? And at one point they were broken. Like his glasses are a big kind of a tell.
Yes. So this guy also talked about that. So he talked about, first of all, like something with the way the glasses were looked like they were digitally imposed. But then in other interviews, he's wearing glasses that are clearly broken, but they're broken in different ways at different times, almost like the position of the glasses is like supposed to be sending a sign of something. I mean, it's one of these things that like sounds too, I can't believe we're talking about this. This sounds ridiculous, but this is where we're at with shit, right? And on some of the videos of him early on, he looks almost translucent, and not translucent like a person who hasn't gotten sun in a long time, translucent like that's a hologram or something like that, right? So this brings me to, and I'm not going to say much more about this, but I think that like there's a good possibility that Edward Snowden was the first big experiment in a certain kind of deep fake. Okay. And that this is largely where one aspect of this multi-pronged, multi-fought over, faction battle over control of Joe Rogan is going. Mm-hmm. And this is, and we're seeing this also, we're seeing this in a lot of places, but like, you know, Kamala Harris is another one. Like, I think all we're looking at with Kamala Harris at this point is a deep fake, and possibly with Joe Biden as well.
100%. Right? Well, and also Nancy Pelosi with the good morning.
Well, that was fucking
morning.
That was fucking weird.
What was that?
That speaks a little bit more to like a clone or like a Robotoids kind of character. If you do any research into the way some of those work, and that they have, or if you watch Westworld and you see when the hosts go off their programs or they start glitching and they have to bring them back into the base and reprogram them and rewrite their scripts and all that kind of stuff. So that's one kind of technology, and I think we see both because I think different factions have different technologies, and then also these things are constantly advancing, and part of the confusion is having one generation of technology and another generation appear in the same. It's kind of like on 9/11 you might have Everyone like was going to fight forever about whether it was thermite, nukes, or a directed energy weapon when it's all three, and different factions controlling each, and all three being there to confuse and let people fight over all that kind of stuff. So is it deepfake? Is it clones? Is it cyborgs? Is it mind control? All these things are a factor.
Right.
And so, but Edward Snowden, like, basically is that. Right. And so just like, you know, most of what we hear from Joe Biden is just him giving a statement from his basement, or if there is any interaction or interviews, it's only a few questions long and it's very simple and softball-y. So that would be the exact same way that Snowden has been communicating, whether it's through Joe Rogan or any of his other appearances. It's almost always hours of him giving monologue and then a few basic questions that are not meant to challenge him, but are just meant to prove that there's some sort of sentience on the other side that is responding to a question being asked.
Yeah, that was really clear in this one, because a couple times Joe did interrupt and he couldn't, like, Edward wasn't having it. He was just going where he was going, and he stumbled on his words a few times, but then picked up the script. It was very, very clear, like, this is the hologram monologue.
Do you watch Westworld?
No, at this point I'm not watching. I can't with the programming. I'm not watching anything.
There's that Westworld is so thick on so many narratives that we're seeing right now, and really understanding the way that a lot of these technologies and psychologies work, that like if somehow you can muster up or hold your nose or something, like if I was going to say there's one to watch, that would be the one. Just say
I think I'm done. I'm done with television and movies until the whole sham has been exploded.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into the Netflix in a bit, but they lost me.
Yeah.
They've lost my attention.
Yeah. So that's kind of like, I'm trying to think if there's another aspect of Edward Snowden that I think we can do a deeper dive on this, like at a later point. I don't want to.
What do you think the point was of this one? And I know you only watched the first 27 minutes, and it's clear, you know, they're laying the groundwork for something.
So I think, and this is the last thing I'm going to say really about this part of it, I think one of the things that's going on in these early days in the new Joe Rogan deal with Spotify and in the new studio is the laying down of a few certain things that are gonna be recurring, and the adjusting people to them, and then the seeing if people notice anything, right?
Okay.
So I think that this is going to be a huge platform for deepfake, and I think that I think the appearance of the studio is part of it. What it looks like.
It looks like a communist dungeon.
Right, but also just like the
it has a weird lighting. It has
the
a
tone
weird
and the texture in the lighting is not far different from some things that you see in the underground bases or in the cloning centers or
it doesn't look organic. Like his old one had his like ephemera and his special things that he had collected, and this one is just,
well, the other one was analog and this is completely digital, or even something beyond digital. It's almost holographic, right?
Exactly.
And so it's the kind of thing that, like, you're not even sure when you're watching it if those people are actually in the studio. It's almost like watching their likenesses be superimposed on what we think is the studio, but it's some kind of like very advanced green screen or something like that. So
I also think it's deliberate that it's so small, since part of the sort of Agenda 21 goal is to put us in these small.
It almost makes me feel like the whole studio is in an Airstream trailer.
It looks like it. It looks like half an Airstream. It's
right.
so,
It's like the smallest model, like the kind you tow behind, not the kind that has its own, right? And it's really small, but even like the shape of the walls feels like something. Or the other thing like that I think about is like a lot of the underground bunkers are like submarine shape in nature. Like they're like rods or tubes underground. So almost
it feels
like
underground. It feels like it's either underground or off planet.
Right, or in an Airstream. Yeah. And underground and off planet might be the same thing. So there we go. Right. So there's that. So I think that this is setting the stage for a lot of stuff. So I think the technology that we're seeing being deployed in these early episodes, the guests that are being brought to us, and then there's this whole issue with Spotify. So maybe we can go there to your next question, which was?
Well, even a question. It was just this charade of Joe now being a rebellious problem for Spotify and the youngsters at Spotify demanding his resignation or whatever. It's just so silly. Well, I don't even know what to say about it, except it's a ridiculous charade.
Yeah, and that's the point. So I think they're trying to set the stage for the idea that Joe Rogan is very controversial.
Right, that he's gone rogue. Because you look at the comments underneath his Adam Curry episode, and they were overwhelmingly, wow, Joe is such a Spotify shill.
Right.
So it seemed like the next logical step to pull a stunt like that to attempt to shift the perception.
So we have thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So we have this thing where Joe Rogan actually is being sort of manhandled and controlled on a certain level by Spotify, right?
I don't think sort of.
Wait, let me hear the rest of my thing. And then this other thing where they're acting like Spotify is not controlling him by staging this faux uprising of the people that work there, right? So that's almost in response to to people's questions about whether, you know, Spotify, right? So it's a very, I don't even know if I have a word for it, but it's synthetic on every level, right?
It's
There's
so
nothing controversial about Joe Rogan. There's nothing, he hasn't been controversial, in my opinion, for at least 8 to 10 years. 8 years. At least 8 years he hasn't been, maybe 7. Very controversial. We basically, I'd say that what we see with Joe Rogan for the last 7 years always is in the range of, I appreciate him being truthful on this subject at the best side, to this is complete propaganda bullshit.
Yeah.
Every once in a while he has like a really great show where I have almost no complaints about, like that show he did with that Abigail Shires about the transgender thing. I thought that was really good, right? And of course that's the one that they're complaining about. But I don't even think that there was really anything controversial said in that. It was just basically like, maybe we shouldn't give hormones to children. That's not, there shouldn't be a planet on which that's controversial. That was like the furthest extent of what, right? So it's
or the thing with the athletes, with the like male to female transition boxers who are dominating and putting people at actual risk.
What do I think about that, or what do I think about his opinion on that?
No, I think that was another thing that he said.
That's not really controversial. Like it really isn't. Like Martina Navratilova thinks that's wrong too. Right? So you have like who's the first or the second not only out gay person in tennis, but the first, like her coach was a transgender person, right? Saying that that's not a good idea, right? So like this isn't a controversial topic either.
No, not at all. And not to take us too off topic, but did you hear that Newsom just announced that inmates can choose their gender prison? So like a dude convicted of like brutal rape and murder can say, I identify as a woman and be put in a female prison?
Not surprising. Not
wow.
Surprising. Right, not surprising. Okay, but
did you see Tim Pool's assessment of the fake Spotify Rogan thing?
I listened to him talking with the long-haired dude and the short-haired dude about some of this. So I think that this is what, so I think Tim is like said some things that are really true, that are like different than the things that I cover in my analysis of the situation, right? Tim comes at it from a different perspective. But like what's so interesting is how one person who's being totally paid and controlled can give such good of an analysis of another person who's being totally paid and controlled.
Wait, you think Tim's being totally paid and controlled?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's put a pin in that, because the reason that I mentioned it, I just saw it in Tim's sort of normal Timcast where it was just him. And in the first maybe 10 minutes, he alludes to thinking that Joe is controlled. And he's like, we're not going to go into that. But he said it, and it had me thinking it would be really interesting if we could get Tim on to have that conversation.
Tim will never come on.
So who's controlling Tim?
I think that like basically whatever faction controlled Alex Jones during the first Trump run is controlling Tim during this Trump run. The same money factions, right? Because the way that Alex shifted from being so firmly both parties are bad to so firmly pro-Trump is the same way that Tim has shifted from being, I don't really vote, I'm outside of politics, to I'm voting for Trump. And like he's laying down the same like level 1 conspiracies that Alex Jones used to lay down. Like for as much as he says he doesn't like conspiracy, like he is laying down, whether it was through how he was initially talking with Adam, which I actually think that this control came in through Adam when they were together. Like Robert has a theory on it. Maybe he can, this will be part of our 3-way show, right?
Are we talking about Alex right now, or are we talking about Tim?
Tim.
Okay.
So when he had Adam on the show for a couple months and they got to heights of success right? Like yes. That was sort of how that level of control sort of came in. So,
interesting.
So Tim is now, if you look, Tim is now pro-Trump. And
do you think anyone can be pro-Trump and not controlled?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. One of the people I would love for us to talk to, because if you assess our situation from a certain level, I actually agree with her on everything 100% practically. But if you take it any levels out from level 1, then the things she's saying, it's not that she's wrong. It's that, have you considered this? And after you consider these things that maybe you weren't aware of, is your assessment still the same? Is that chick Karlin Borisenko?
I don't know her.
She's great. She's the one who like, she looks kind of like she's a lesbian, but she's not, because she's got like that lesbian like angled hair, right? Like the
that, like 80s crooked hair.
Yeah, right. And she's the one who initially like
she just lives in Silver Lake.
No, she looks like she does, but she doesn't. She doesn't live in California. But she kind of became popular when she started making videos about how she decided, even though she was a lefty, she decided to go check out a Trump rally after like there had been all this like weird like anti-Trump stuff that had invaded her knitting group. She has like a knitting circle, and it had gotten really weird. And she's like, this is so weird. I have to understand why this is happening. And she went to a Trump rally, and it started her shift. And now she's fairly pro-Trump with a reasonable, she hasn't totally lost her brain yet in being pro-Trump, right? And she's kind of interesting. Yeah, like she's in that knee-jerk response to like, I've left so the right is better, that at a certain point I think she'll come out of, but some of her assessments of things are very good, right? And she may, I feel like there's a way we could approach that she talked to us, because I really like her, but there's a few things that, her analysis of this thing going on at Spotify, I just listened to a video with her this morning about why, like, she's believing, she's not understanding the game that's being played from higher levels here, but if you're assessing it just at taking as truth what we're being told, her analysis is pretty good and better than anyone else's. She's an organizational psychologist. So she trains like managers as to how to deal with employees, so that you can have employees feel heard without them taking over and telling the bosses what to do, kind of thing, which is what she's assessing is going on there now. So she's very interesting. So I'd love to talk to her. Now, I can't remember what my point, so yeah, so she is pro-Trump, and I don't think she's controlled.
Okay.
I don't think Styx is controlled. I think he's wrong about a lot of stuff, but I also think he's right about a lot of stuff. He's hilarious to listen to, right? Kind of thing. So I don't think he's controlled. I don't think that guy, Anthony Brian Logan, like he's kind of monotone and boring to listen to. He's a black man super pro-Trump. I don't think he's controlled. I think he just pretty much flat delivers the news from his perspective and whatnot. So yes, I think you can definitely be pro-Trump and not controlled, but I just don't think Tim can be pro-Trump and not controlled.
Okay, I hear that.
Yeah, and so anyway, so but it's interesting. He is so on a narrow band of things. He is so good and aware, and only I haven't heard anyone else express certain positions he expresses, because he's been in some interesting positions that not many other people have been in, right? Because he made his name as a citizen journalist, and then accrued a tremendous amount of power in like nouveau alternative media because they wanted to seem edgy. You know what I mean? So he had, there's no one else like him in the media who had kind of his rise and kind of has done all the things he's done. So he's super unique. You know what I mean?
Something that I've started to notice about Tim, and you and I did not talk about this at all, but it goes into our sort of larger, like Weinstein takeover, like that piece of it. And also let's bookmark the fact that they've ditched their agenda. Sort of. They ditch it for this year.
Well,
Allegedly.
They're allegedly. We'll get to that. We can get to that.
So we'll come back to that. But what I did notice is that Tim is starting to talk like Brett Weinstein, and he's starting to use his sort of right, wrong, heterodox sort of speech patterns. I noticed it slip in, and part of me wondered, oh, are they joining forces? Are they kind of colluding for their little like elitist hipster takeover?
So my first response would be no. My second response would be possibly, and then my third response would be no again, but not no at the exclusion of possibly, right? So Tim never talks about him or Unity or any of those kinds of stuff.
I'm just picking up on speech patterns.
So that's super interesting. I think it's entirely possible that a lot of these people have been through some of the same education and training or programming or have similar handlers, and so that could be part of the explanation for it. Like at one point, like when I first started to notice some of these kinds of things, there's like two people who were on in the early days of RT that seemed like they had completely separate perspectives and interests and whatnot, but they had a strange pronunciation of the same word, right? And it made me think, okay, these people there was like a training or an education or some sort of coding or symbolism that comes through all of their stuff. And I was like, this is weird, but it's a thing. And I know my intuition knows it's a thing, right? Like that strange pronunciation from completely different people talking about different stuff with totally different backgrounds and different life experience and different education. That is a weird thing, right? Yeah. It's not like a tomato thing. Like it's right. Like it's okay. So, so that's, I mean, that's certainly possible. The Unity.
It'll be interesting to see how that can, like, where that is leading. That.
So the day, so I know that Brett announced the other day at the beginning of an episode with a gentleman I'd never heard of before, and then that chick that I don't know why anybody listens to named Chloe Valdery. But he announced that they were suspending their campaign unless there was an emergency. Then it could be reenacted at any point. You don't ever hear. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You don't ever hear that. You didn't hear Tulsi Gabbard or even Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren say, I'm suspending my campaign unless there's an emergency.
Well, I thought that the whole reason they started this is because they see this as an emergency, which is also, I thought, why our civil liberties are being taken left and right, and a lot of people are acting like hysterical psycho-fascist babies, is because it's such an emergency. But I noticed on the Justin Amash show that you sent me the link to, how he was lobbying so hard to get the libertarians to put them on the ticket, which I thought, like, part of it was adorably naive, and part of it I thought was like really arrogant and out of line.
Yeah, totally. I thought Justin Amash was great on it. Like I was like,
he handled it so well.
Yeah. So
yeah, but that indicated to me like, oh, he was trying that as his last ditch attempt. And then I didn't see the show that you saw, but I got the newsletter.
I only saw like the first 15 minutes because I just can't with the Chloe Valdery girl, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's so it feels to me like they're like trying a variety of things to gain consensus. They're all about consensus, right? They want to gain consensus. Like, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I think there's always like a lot of things going on in the control systems. There's multiple control systems, not just one. We'll go with the one that like works the best in the moment. They have 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 1,400 separate plans they're working on, and whichever one makes the most sense at the moment it needs to be deployed, that's the one that they'll go with, right? So I think that there's an attempt to gain consensus so that if and when Unity 2020 suddenly becomes a player, it will seem like something that everyone is in favor of instead of another form of an unfair fascist takeover. Right? Like, so this idea that like getting the libertarians on board and the blah, blah, blah on board, right? But the fact that he keeps alluding to this like emergency thing, like makes me feel like he's aware of an emergency that's going to happen, right? Like,
right, like maybe an assassination attempt.
Or like an October surprise against both candidates, like a certain funded kind of operation against both candidates. So it'll be like, well, fuck, nobody wants to vote for either one of these. So now what are we going to do? It's only a few days until the election and nobody else has a plan, right?
weird about it is that he goes on and on about the inefficacy and the toxicity of the duopoly, and yet he's proposing something that is still entrenched
in that,
in the same duopoly.
Right.
Like, run Tulsi independent and get a triumph and move on with your life, unless you're disingenuous.
Right. Like the whole thing, I've never heard somebody, like, the other thing that's super interesting, I'm reading this really interesting book on synchronicity right now, and it's coming at it from a perspective of physics and psychology, and they're talking about, like, the thought experiments just being a waste of time because they're not reproducible in a laboratory unless it's a totally controlled condition. So, like, even if you, like, if your thought experiment is 100% and then you go and try it in the real world and it's a windy day, it's not going to work, right? And everything, Brett, how many times have you heard Brett or Eric say, let's do a thought experiment, right? So, like, I've never heard somebody other than maybe myself who spends so much time going on and on and on about nonsense, right? But the point, but
academics do, right? That's kind of endemic to academia.
Right, but he pretends he's serious and that I'm not, right? Like, he's an academic, right? He's, he's very, very serious and well-respected, and I'm just a nonsense talking head on the fucking YouTube, right? And I'm totally fine with that. Like, that provides me enough cover to say whatever I want to say, and I don't care what anyone thinks. But he's supposed to be somehow serious and important and well-researched and respected and blah, 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 right? But I mean, he's just like, all of this is an imaginary scenario, but how many hours has he put into it?
Yeah, it's weird that they devoted so much time and effort in building the website and Dark Horse podcast episodes, and now they're bailing. I don't really.
They're not bailing. They're not bailing. So here's okay. They're building a brown shirt movement, and I'll tell you how. Okay, so this is the other thing. There's a few words that he used. Let's see if you can guess the two words. Hold on a second.
Bless you.
That he uses over and over and over again, which are not totally unusual words, but like, what is he really talking about when he says these things? Let's see if you can guess the two. Robert and I have both.
I hate guessing games. I really don't like them. Evolutionary
and reimagining.
Okay.
So we have to evolve everything. Everything is evolutionary, so it's not okay as it is. We are more concerned about what it's going to become. And reimagine. We have to reimagine patriotism. We have to reimagine freedom, reimagine democracy, which basically means give somebody that's not that thing, but tell them that it's that thing. Exactly. Right. Okay. So this morning they
call a potato chip a tomato and tell me, and then convince me that
this morning Articles of Unity, which also, if you look at the Unity logo, and I get into this with my show I'll put out on Wednesday with Victor Buga, the Unity logo, the symbol is the inverse of a Q.
Oh.
Very interesting. We're getting into the Q Celts and the P Celts in that episode and whatever, right? So it's kind of interesting. All right, but anywho, let me find.
While you're looking, the other piece that I want to comment on, because you had mentioned that he had taken, like, one of the many ideas that they like to borrow from us was moving from debate to dialectic.
Right.
It's the same fucking thing, but just with a fancy word. Like, it's not a collaborative diplomatic conversation. It's still a right wrong. So it's just so interesting to see, and I watch him now where, like, with his NLP lessons, where, like, it's just so choppy and fragmented as he's trying to please so many people and make the sham of the idea seem integrated.
Yeah. Okay. So this morning they put out a video on the Articles of Unity YouTube channel. I'm not going to play it because I don't want to get dinged with the copyright strike, because they will do that about this shit whenever we, okay? So it's called Unity Today number 001, which means that they're planning on there being lots of them. Otherwise they would just say number 1, right? It's going to be 10. They would just say number 1.
They're going to be hundreds.
100. That's going to be your daily, it's going to be daily affirmations with Jack Handy, basically, right? That kind of thing. Okay. But it's basically 5 things you can do to, like, help them bring this idea into the, public conversation. Fucking go watch this guy, like this smarmy guy. I don't know who this guy is. Ooh, we're getting interference right now. You hear that?
Every time we talk about Brett Weinstein or Eric Weinstein, that's when the interference comes in. It's super consistent.
Okay, so this is, I don't know if this is the 5, okay, so he has 5 things that you can do, but then there's also a list of 5 things that don't sound exactly like what the 5 things to do in the video were, but this is in the description, and let's just look at these now. They're a little different than the 5 things that were said. So it's a 1.5-minute video, so everyone will watch it, right? So number 1, this is not necessarily the 5 that the guy talks about. This is a separate list of 5, just being clear on this. Help build the unity movement and win. So I guess they're doing a prize or something. Subscribe to the YouTube page for the latest news. Update your Facebook profile pic with the new unity frame. So this is just like the Black Lives Matter shit or the gay pride. You get everyone to have a rainbow, get everyone to have a black square. I'm helping, right? Like, okay. The next one, and this is my favorite one. Join your fellow patriots in deeper discussions at discussarticlesofunity.org. Okay, one of the things that Brett has gone in his own mind and spread out to everyone, he is reimagining patriotism. And in his version of patriotism, there's no constitution. Now, I don't like patriotism. I'm not even that big of a fan of the Constitution, not because I don't think I think there are good things in there, but I think it doesn't go far enough on certain things and is too restrictive on other things, okay? So I'm not saying that I'm against freedom. That's not what I'm saying when I say that the Constitution to me isn't the biggest deal in the world. But he straight up said in his conversation with, I think, Justin Amash, that he was not for the Constitution, right? So that's an important thing. If you're not...
Wait. Did he say why?
Yeah.
I watched it, but I'm not remembering.
Maybe it wasn't in the one with, I've listened to so much nonsense from him that, like, I don't know why I do this to myself, but I think there's a there.
So I can continue to listen to him. That's amazing to me.
Because I think there's a there, and I'm good at catching some of these little things, and so, you know, whatever, right? So I think it was in the Justin Amash one, but I'm not sure. It could have been in a different one where he's talking about, oh, well, he's not really a fan of the Constitution because, you know, with people who drew up the Constitution could never have imagined the issues we're dealing with today. I think it's his way of saying he doesn't believe in free speech or privacy or gun rights or any of that kind of crap, but he didn't really say it that way. He repackaged it in one of his nonsense ways of saying stuff, right? So
he reimagined it. He reimagined his anti-Americanism as patriotism. That's what the unity ticket is.
Right. It's the inversion. It's inverting everything, right? And so, even when you look at what I said about the symbol, it's the inversion of a Q, right? Like, it's fascinating, which tells me that maybe they're even funded by the same people. Mind control both sides, right? Okay. So he basically, like, if now patriotism is wanting to do away with the Constitution, right? So that's fact. But he talks about this every time he talks about unity, about how we're looking for people that are patriotic. But all of his patriotic people don't actually believe in the Constitution.
No.
Okay, and then number 5.
Or like or respect the ideals upon which this nation was founded.
Right. And then number 5 is...
I'd be curious to know, it would be great, I mean, not that it's happening, but let's say we were interviewing Brett right now. My number 1 question would be, how are you defining patriotism?
Yeah. So maybe people if any people who follow this are also in the unity kind of movement thing or whatever, maybe you guys can elicit that answer from him. Number 5 on the list in the description section, I can't remember if it's said slightly different in the video. Follow our Instagram page. Like, these are important things you can do. Right, that's like almost the same as your Simpson meme that has Homer or whoever it was, one of the characters, like holding up a black square and saying, "I'm helping."
It was the little retarded kid.
Okay, I don't know. I don't watch The Simpsons, but whatever. It's just this is nonsense. But that shit's gonna be up every day. Every day there's gonna be those little videos telling people the thing that they can do to be, you know, good, right? Whatever the fuck it is, right? So. Yeah. Now, how did we get into this again?
We jumped over here by way of Tim Pool, and I was saying I started to pick up on some speech patterns. Yeah.
So no, I'd say that maybe it isn't that they're working together, but they're being funded by some of the same people, and that they've been through some of the same.
It'll be interesting to see, because you and I are also envisioning a longer game that's coming through Brett and Heather and this unity thing. So I'm wondering if there will at some point be a convergence. Who's to say?
Well, all this is about synthesis at some point, so yes. Yeah. Okay, so then are we good on the Spotify, the Joe Rogan, the Tim Pool, the...
I feel good on that. I want to check in on our time because I know we wanted to do an afterwards, and we also wanted to talk Netflix, and I'm not sure if you want to do that here or afterwards or what else is on the agenda.
Okay, so the thing that I wanted to say, let's just go to afterwards. Let's do the next little segment in afterwards. Let's do that. Over there, we're going to talk Netflix and the secretive part of the conversation. Over on Patreon, you can go to Dani's Patreon or to mine, and you can find the afterwards there. So any offerings for the people today?
My usual coaching, my book, my stuff. You can find it all through DaniCatz.com.
Okay, yay. All right, you guys, usual stuff for me too. And for those of you who will be in Texas later in the week, I will see you there. All right. Toodaloo.